Hey guys, how's it going? I'm Duke of Italy, favorite lo-fi music YouTuber, and today I'm looking pretty good. I'm not gonna lie to you guys. I think I look kind of nice right now, but you know what's more important than that? It is December 3rd as of recording this. The last episode of Nothing But Black Metal November was uploaded on the 1st, and we're recording the thrilling conclusion. Did we get all 60 good albums this year? And, I think it worked out pretty fine. And I'm happy to say that we got another 15 to cover today that are just going to knock your socks off. It's been quite a run this year. I'm very happy to say a lot of good stuff. Some stuff that we'd like to forget about, but it's all right. It's all right. It's all good. And I'm already ready for 2023's list, if that's even happening. But that just depends if the feds catch me first or if they allow Bandcamp in prison. But let's get into it. 15 albums. Let's go. And up first, we got kind of an interesting one here. We got the band Flames of Hell with their album Fire and Steel. This is possibly the first extreme metal album from the country of Iceland. It's certainly the first black metal album there, and it's one of the few black metal albums for a long, long time. This is proto. This is blackened thrash for you, and it's pretty novel, but that is kind of all it is. And it shows a pretty different side to first wave black metal. If you take like Merciful Fate and you add like the hypnotic side of some like really crushing atmospheric black metal that would hit in the late 90s, then that's kind of what you'd get here. The vocals are all over the place in terms of quality. I think the vocals are simply not up to snuff. The riffing is very repetitive, which some might say is a detriment to the quality of this album here, but I think it actually provides something to actually attach to. If you like Cirith Ungol, you might like the vocals, or I guess maybe potentially if you like Merciful Fate. I don't like the vocals in those bands. I know burn him or whatever you guys have to complain about. It's stupid these days, but due to my opinion, I don't like these features. I do think that this album could have been 10 minutes shorter though, but what you do get here is some pretty angsty, sort of thrashy stuff going on here. Relatively clear vocals, nothing too complicated in terms of songwriting or lyrics, but it is kind of a fun little time here. It's a little creepy, it's a little evil, and I'm sure people on Twitter would love it if that's your kind of crowd, but unfortunately that's not what makes me love an album, so I give this an okay. But of course, actually, I didn't listen to that at all. I listened to a band called Savage Necromancy with Feathers Fall to Flames. If you've ever seen that iconic photo of that war metal GF going like this, I'm not changing it to like not be associated with a political party or anything like that, but she was just holding her fist up like that because like rock on or whatever, and they were all dressed like Blasphemy. And that's what this band is. It's the female-fronted war metal band. And I couldn't honestly tell. I was working out to this thing, and you get a really cool riffy style of war metal with a lot of really good riffs. It's like if you took Rotting Christ and made it death metal inspired, and you took that war metal route, but it's still pretty savage stuff. It's in the name Savage Necromancy, but it's pretty wild for having such a good variety of riffs. It's not just straight up caveman riffs. You got your Kerry King solos, of course, but overall it's just a punishing listen. But it's also a little bit fun. Speaking of war metal, up next is Revenge with Infiltration, Downfall, Death. No jokes on this album. This album is nothing but a flurry of blows, a hail of machine gun fire. It is extreme. It's grinding, aggressive war metal full of pick slides. And it's got whiplash switch-ups. This is one of the tightest performing war metal bands probably ever. Maybe the tightest performing war metal band. I'm sure they'd have to rehearse just as much as your average progressive metal band because they will switch into something so much more grinding in such a flash. There are some mid-paced sections that are relatively brief, but they're crazy in building tension, even though they only last at most 10 seconds. The song Barbed Anti has some of the loudest and grimiest parts in this style of war metal. Rhythmically, it's just crazy interesting. This album will put both a scowl and a smile on your face because it's just that awesome. Genuinely. Is it much different from the other Revenge albums? I wouldn't really know. Revenge is a band I haven't listened to that much of, but I'm sure if this is anything to go off of, all of these albums are worth checking out, because this thing's pretty great. And after that, we get a little band called Talk with their album Noregs Vipon. Pretty melodic sounding black metal, except, and they don't tell you this on Rate Your Music for some reason, this is sort of like a black and roll album, and no one told me that or mentioned that before, but this is the album actually where the banjo shows up on the song Mirror, I believe, and it's a cool banjo part. Does it add to the atmosphere at all? No. It's not Panopticon, where you can really like sew the banjo in and it makes a lot of sense and it sounds great. It's melodically super pleasing and it adds a really nice folk element. No, it's kind of just here to keep riffing along with it. Of course, it is the slightly melodic style of Talk. I do prefer the more pagan-y sounding melodic stuff, like off of Talk's first album. But there's a groovy nature to this album that does add some appeal. It isn't necessarily appealing to me, as if my black metal's sort of groovy in a way, I would want it to sort of keep up like a war-ish nature or some kind of element that can tie it to some sort of atmosphere, because that's kind of what I listen to. Anything classically inspired, such as neoclassical darkwave for that matter, that's what I listen to it for. And just in case you guys didn't know, black metal is very classically inspired. If you look up interviews of Thorns and Mayhem, they both said like, yeah, our riffs are invented from classical music. There are some acoustic bits on this album here, and they're pure Kino. I mean, the guitarist of Talk really knows how to play acoustic guitar. Mir has the banjo, and it's also the best song of all time. Yeah, you know, it's a Talk album. It's not their best. I don't know why I listened to this one expecting much different, but the production style actually does kind of hold it back a little bit. If it was more raw, it would have that sort of wild, barbaric, granted NSBM feel, because a lot of NSBM bands do that. They add a lot of groove, but at the same time they're raw, which adds sort of a sonic appeal to it. But I think right here you do have a good album. And instead of this, you know, Philosophem is something I listen to often, and I listened to it this month. So if you want to replace this, then it's Philosophem this month. And after that we have Dark Space 1 by Dark Space. If you've listened to Dark Space before, you kind of know what you're going to get into here. You've got the huge, lengthy, atmospheric black metal sections paired together with the winter synth, complete ambient minimal synth stuff, or the more harmony-filled stuff that makes it super dense, the electronic drums that are really crushing. And if you think of your cosmic black metal as being something of all this bright stuff and really actiony stuff like Mare Cognitum, for example, that is not Dark Space. Dark Space is much more realistic. They tell you straight up, space is empty, space is dark, space has stuff that is not very common at all. And whenever something does hit in this album, it's not a good thing. It's sort of an interesting answer to the question of like, would you rather there be nothing out there or something out there, because both is equally as terrifying. And it's almost like every time a track ends, it's like right upon you encountering something out there, whether it's just a rock or something living. I couldn't tell you, because your hands are too frozen to tell. And that is, of course, due to the guy from Paysage d'Hiver being in this band. This album's pretty cold. It isn't as winding as Dark Space 3, which is the album I covered last year, but this album is actually more riffy and thrashy. But don't get it twisted, it's not riffy and thrashy. The first track on this whole thing is probably one of the weakest Dark Space tracks, even though it's very fun. It's kind of just riff salad. Every riff will just go on top of each other. Be that as it may, I still find it very appealing. The atmosphere is still thick and hazy, and it's just kind of a weird intro to the track as a whole, or the album as a whole, rather, because as an opening 7.5 minute track, and it stacks all these layers of riffs upon each other, and then it leads into the more drony ambient tracks that are on the rest of the album that are superior to this one, and probably equal the quality of Dark Space 3, if not are better. It's such a hypnotic experience. It is a straight up abyssal sound. It's like you're staring at nothing but black. And this album is a bit long, being about 70 minutes in length, but I think it's really hypnotic. You kind of just zone out to it. So I give this a firm great. And after that, we have a recent release. This is Grand Belial's Key with Kohanic Charmers. I covered GBK last year, and I did not get the appeal at all. I now get the appeal. I just still think it's not that amazing, to be honest. Oh, Duke doesn't like the band that hates minorities. Throw a rock at him. Sorry, bros, I'm not racist. You know, being against minorities aside, how was the musical content of this thing? Mixed. A lot of good. I won't lie. The riffs are inventive and the vocals are actually kind of great. They're very wretched, very hateful. Shocker. Which at points it's pretty great. And if you love GBK, you're gonna love this album. But, you know, despite the heavy metal influence here, the sort of fun qualities, they just don't really stick with me in a way that I find appealing. So I'm comfortable with calling this thing a good. I think it's a good album, but I mean, I'm not going to be rushing to listen to it again. And instead of that, you know, I own Weltschmerz, Illustra Nos, great album that's actually rather varied with instead of the rock elements of GBK, instead it's symphonic stuff or orchestral stuff rather, and no, not synths. I mean, they have an actual chamber, sort of like a little chamber group of a string section on one track. There's some horns occasionally. There's an opera singer at one point. It's great stuff. I listened to it last year and I own a copy of it. It's fantastic. And up next is straight from France, the band Mutilation with Remains of a Ruined, Dead, Cursed Soul. This is good old grimy, raw, vampiric black metal. And it's a bunch of different styles of that depressing, lethargic, and atmospheric riffing style that if you don't love it, then this isn't the genre for you. And I mean black metal, because this is some of the peak of black metal right here. This is the end-all, be-all right here. You know, it doesn't really get more important than a release such as this, unless you're in Mutilation's discography. It's very interesting, and it's very dark, and it's highly emotional as well. So I recommend you guys check it out for yourself and sort of get your own take on it, but I give this thing a great. I'm sure you can tell. Similarly, atmospheric, but on the total opposite side, we have the band Forteresse with metal noir Quebecois. It's Quebec black metal. You know, France is terrible, Canada's terrible, but France has some fantastic black metal, and so does Canada. And you bring it together, and you get some terribly fantastic atmospheric black metal, and it is slow. Slow as an MF, you know. This is like when you talk about atmo riffs, this thing repeats, man. You got 8-minute plus tracks easy. It's like Drutk, but more crushing and dark. It actually reminds me quite a bit of Hate Forest's riffing style. It's very much like, this is what's grim and cult, and we're going to give it to you. And it keeps that sort of like prideful notion forward, and not just in a nationalist sense, because they're Canadian nationalists, which I won't get into politics of that because I think it's a rather silly argument. It's Canada. But this thing is cozy, it's snowy, and it's occasionally a little bit hotter, and altogether a little bit hostile, but it's kind of prideful in a way, you know. So if you want to listen to some NSBM, but you don't want to listen to NSBM, then you kind of got something going here. The lead guitar on this album is rather subdued, but I still find it rather great because the melodic embellishments are something that's really nice. The repetition, though, is played very fast. You know, the riffing style itself is fast. Every track here does have the momentum to get through not only the track, but the whole album, which is rather interesting to me. Altogether, unique atmosphere, really fun album. I do think the folky bits that start off a couple of the tracks here that are just some fiddling, I'm like, it's a little cheesy. It doesn't really make me feel prideful for Canada, but I never would anyways. But, you know, the fact that the band came even close to having me consider that is a monumental achievement. So, of course, this thing is great. And after that, we have a popular band's less popular pick with Dissection's The Somber Lane. I'm going to be honest with you guys. For a band that murdered a guy, I couldn't think of anything less cult than Dissection. This hyper-melodic style is the most uncult, uncool thing ever. It's riff salad through and through with lyrics that I don't personally care about. It's not as fast as Storm of the Lightsbane, which the main quality of Storm of the Lightsbane that you could appreciate is that it's so blisteringly fast. It's maybe the fastest feeling black metal album out there. And I won't lie, the riffers of this band are incredibly talented. So even though I don't love melodic black metal when it tries to be this melodic, I think they do a pretty good job in crafting some really interesting sounds. I actually think the track Somber Lane and the track Great Prophecy are the highlights here. And, you know, if you want just riff ideas or melodies that sound decent, this is your album. But I think the emotions are lacking a little bit, but I do still think this is good. But what's better is Melino by the band Aklis, or whatever it is. It's a band that's been relatively popular these past 5 years or so because they keep releasing modern atmospheric black metal records that have a spooky atmosphere and some synth work that is rather impressive because it really fills in all that hollow space left because it's black metal and you only have a pretty minimalist band setup, but you know, the atmosphere, it does set in. There are some really cool ambient portions, which is something I really appreciate. But if you like bands like, say, Oranzi Pazuzu, you're probably going to love this right here, and I do too. Is it my favorite thing in the world? No, but I think it's something that is not only worth checking out, but maybe even considering purchasing. And after that, we have Total Vernichtung with Die Rückkehr des Schwarzen Todes. It's that one NSBM guy who makes pop punk riffs. I've mentioned him before. I reviewed one of his albums, but this is actually a demo, so it's a little bit different, but it is full length, so you get a lot of it, and you get way too much of it, because it's this and that one Drowning Delight album are the two releases where I'm like, this production isn't just raw, it's flat. I love my raw production. Give me artifacts, give me crunch, give me something that's gonna hurt my ears. Don't give me something that's gonna bore me to death, because everything here just gets too muddy and honestly compressed. It just sounds bad. But it does not sound like the other Total Vernichtung album here. You know, the riffs are, it's a pretty riffy album, but I don't think it goes as far as the other one. If you want a little bit of a punky vibe to the whole thing, you're gonna like what's going on here a little bit. I can't hear any bass guitar on this whole thing, but if you can, then let me know when. Yeah, it's riff salad. It's very little thought. I'm gonna give this an okay. You know, I don't really want to waste my time too much on it, but I'm not gonna say I hated it. And you know, I wanted something more raw, so I actually listened to the Graveflowers debut demo, Long Drawn Out Goodbye. And this is a band I covered last year with Hyacinth Garden. I don't remember if it's an EP or an album, but it's the purple looking one. And they were known for being super raw, Cascadian black metal. And normally that's gonna induce cringe in a lot of people, and normally it would for me too, because I think of bands like that one like communist black metal band from last year that I reviewed that just kind of suck, honestly. Like they fake NSBM. That's like their whole gimmick, is that they're like, we can be just as upset and passionate and prideful about something, and it's like, no, you can't. You can't. Your riffs are bad. But Graveflowers brings it, especially on this demo here, because they have sort of an emo nature to the playing of stuff. Every once in a while there's a quiet, like less distorted guitar moment, something that's a little bit more melodic, intercut by these swamps and hailstorms of noise and thrashy energy. And it's something that has dynamics like nobody's business, and it's something that y'all need to check out because it's amazing, genuinely amazing. I sent it to some of my friends and they're like, yeah, this is super sick. Graveflowers is a band that needs to make another album, or an album at all for that matter. I would listen to it, I'd eat it up, I'd give it a 10 out of 10. And up next, we re-listen to an album because I'm selfish, Zari Wilk with Wrath, Polish black metal. If you want to feel what it's like living in Poland, listen to this, because everyone knows there's a lycanthropy epidemic in Poland right now. All jokes aside, this thing is wonderful. It's scratchy, it's raw, it's abrasive, but not too abrasive necessarily. The guitar tone is the best thing ever. There's some killer pagan riffs in here as well. The yells are wretched and cackling, yet they do not pull you out of the atmosphere even a little bit. It's gloomy, but that little bit of pagan nonsense going on here gives it kind of a witchy vibe. It's kind of mystical. It's paced very well, and the title track is based. It's based. I love it. It's the final track here, and it's the longest one. It's got some quiet moments. And the only thing I can really say for Zari Wilk in the future is to make another album kind of like this, and then you probably got something going on that's awesome. If they just add some of that pacing a little bit in other tracks, then I'd probably make it an album of the year, because, I mean, this album was on my album of the year list last year because it's that good. And after that, if you were looking for something more cult, if you want something that's going to upset some people, if it's going to make you upset, if it's going to make you consider The Rope, Tsar by Sortsind. If you want DSBM that is absolutely the worst thing you've ever heard, but at the same time the best thing you've ever heard, that's all I really need to say about Tsar. It is the worst and best thing you'll ever hear. Look at this album cover. Isn't that terrible? And by terrible, I mean fantastic. It's just the best. It's filthy, scratched up, gouged, depressive, suicidal black metal. It's got the same emotions as Silencer, utterly hopeless. The vocals are incredibly unhinged, and it's harrowing with these dark ambient sections that really swamp out the mix. The vocals do reach harsh noise at points, which I love when that happens. It's winding and super, super dark. All of these tracks have something different to say. There are 3 tracks with piano, which are just haunting and dissonant, and they're so messed up, and I love them. So I'm here first. This is an album you need to listen to be in the know in black metal. Absolutely listen to Sortsind, listen to their second album, listen to all their side projects, because they're all fantastic. This is great. And after that, we have a war metal album, Proclamation's Advent of the Black Omen. And let me tell you, it's overrated. Some people are telling me it's like Blasphemy. It's not as good as Blasphemy. But I have been told this is not their best album. It's caveman riffs and Kerry King solos. Doesn't get much more bare bones than that. The vocals are pretty great though. They're very growly. It's got that little bit of Sarcophago-inspired vocal reverb, which everyone loves. The guitar tone sucks. It's just mud, and when it reaches a higher register, it doesn't sound good either. Some of this bangs. Some of it does not. I'll give it a good though. You know, it's good. But I decided to listen to a different war metal band to replace this one, and it's one that a style I haven't really covered yet, because war metal, I want to make a whole video on war metal. Not even a chart. I just want to do like a video essay on war metal. I'm going to do it at some point. Brahma Strika has this EP. It's their latest EP, and this thing is a burner. And you can tell because it's not black, white, and red. It's just black and red. You can tell from those album covers. And this is one of two Indian, I guess you could call them war noise bands, them and Tetragrammaticide, that are known for throwing the kitchen sink in their sound. And this stuff will absolutely kill a man. I gotta talk about this thing real quick because the middle track is over 10 minutes long. And for war metal, you're like, how do you even go above 5 minutes? Because 5 minutes is quite aggressive for war metal. But here, they use harsh noise elements. There's like an analog synthesizer, and it's swamping out the whole mix. If you want your war metal to be mixed with like early Swans style atmosphere, where it's just the most depraved, pounding thing ever, then this is what you're getting here. It will literally reduce into these like repetitive, drony synths for like 3 minutes at a time, and it goes back into this other stuff. And also, it's got some really nice, brutal death metal influence, some really classic, super low, chuggy riffs that lead back into the war metal mix. Super eclectic EP there. This band really needs to make an album, and it's actually one of the most inspiring black metal albums I've heard in a really long time, or death metal, or grindcore, or noise, or harsh noise, or war metal, or any of these labels you want to put on it. It excels in every single genre here, so go check it out. It's fantastic. And after that, I have something I don't even know if I'll be able to show on camera, Holocausto with Campo de Extermino. You have to DQ this thing. It's okay, but it's kind of novelty. Sort of an early period, multifaceted, blackened thrash release with a lot of death metal influence here. It's kind of just early extreme thrash, if you will. Some people do label it as blackened thrash. I don't really get it. The mix is the worst thing ever. This thing was recorded in a tin can. It's got that real Brazilian sound, but it's not Sarcophago, so don't go looking for Sarcophago. It's fun, it's lo-fi, it's old. The tones do not fit together. They're a bit rough, but you can live. So it's okay. It's certainly novelty, so I think it's worth a listen to everybody at some point, because it shows a pretty important step in extreme metal. And I mentioned this band last time and how I didn't listen to them, and I know that's just insanity because I'm such a big black metal person at this point in time. Marduk, Heaven Shall Burn, ... when we are gathered. I used that one in place of our Holocausto. Listen here, this thing is actual black metal, and it's nothing but black metal. It's straight up, super fast, pretty melodic as well, but it doesn't stray away from the atmosphere at all. I think it's worth everyone's time, and Marduk's discography is something I'll have to cover in the future. So Marduk, classic Swedish black metal, and outside of their Norse core, sure, like a lot, like they're Norse. It's Norse black metal. Doesn't get any more classic than that. It's classic. You kind of have to listen to it. And after that, we have a band I've been looking forward to listening to for the first time. Actually, second time, because I used to own a CD by these guys, but it wasn't nearly as good as this album. Gnaw Their Tongues, Abyss of Longing Throats. And you're probably thinking to yourself, Duke, Gnaw Their Tongues is a black noise band, not a black metal band. But this album right here is pretty black metal. I know I did my research beforehand, and I looked at those little handy rate your music genre tags, and this one has black noise, black ambient, and black metal, and it is certainly all those things. If you want Navaler, but a little bit less drony and a little bit more higher fidelity, this is what you're going to get here. It's still crunchy. The textures are still amazing. You're going to get a lot more bass guitar than any actual guitar here, but it's still distorted to heck, and it's actually a rather pleasing texture, but I say that like anything on this album is pleasing. It's rather discomforting. I'd wager as discomforting as Navaler. And those are both sort of black noise-leaning albums here, and that is such a genre we need to incorporate more into other black metal territory because it's so creative and it's so interesting. And if war noise is a thing right now, and war grind and all these other war subgenres, we're having sort of a war metal renaissance right now, if you will. Then we could do that with normal black metal instead of, just being like, it's RABM now. That stuff sucks. There are some abyssal sounding samples on this whole thing. They sound absolutely horrendous. Truly intriguing walls of electronics. There's a lot of noise, but there are also a lot of strings as well. So you get kind of an orchestral moment here. And the guitar is just growling. And it's sort of like a mix of fidelities. Like every texture sounds like it's differently recorded, but it's used in a way that works really well. It's pretty spooky overall, I gotta recommend this thing, and honestly, Gnaw Their Tongues is a band that everyone should kind of get into if you're into black metal and you want stuff that is adjacent. But there are cases where Gnaw Their Tongues goes into direct black metal, or at least some really abstract sounding black metal. And I'll be covering some Nother Tongue side projects at some point in the future, but this thing is absolutely great. All right, last one, recent release, Doldrum, The Knocking, or the story of the sound that preceded. Yeah, something like that. I thought this was going to be cool because it's about American miners and how they fell into holes and stuff. And I write songs about holes myself, but it's LARP. It's American LARP, but it's still LARP. And it's really progressive stuff. And for that matter, you do get some pretty inventive riffs, stuff that even melodic black metal doesn't even reach. There's some yelled, creepy spoken word, which if that's your speed, hang on to it because it's all it has. The production's pretty flat, which is not my favorite, but it's kind of to be expected in this style of black metal. And the lyrics and vocals are just cheesy. And there's some decent ambience, but, it's not enough. I give this thing an okay. And, it's a real shame that album number 60 is rough like that. I didn't mean to do what I did last year.
Oh. Am I good?
So if you have been sleeping under a rock, you don't know this band Tra here. And I didn't plan this. I didn't plan it. But, I had to listen to this. Tra already released 3 albums this year, and I thought they were done because they released 2 in October. And that was a lot of albums. And they've had 3 this year that are really good. And they made a 4th one. And it's might be my favorite. Honestly, this thing is incredible. It's just 4 tracks, so it's a shorter experience. It's a much more digestible piece of music than any of the other albums from this year. But don't think it's cutting room floor. Don't think it's any less quality. I think it's the most consistent stuff. You could argue that it's a little bit more ambient and synthesizer stuff than the other albums I've been talking about from their discography. I think it's probably, there's actually one track here that's only synthesizers, and half these tracks here are half synthesizers. So it's a bit more synthesizer than black metal, but the black metal sections are still here, and they're very inspiring, and they do remind me a whole lot of the first Tra album from this year. So if you want something that's a bit like that again, but it's got a bit more emotional dynamics, I guess you could say, because there's a lot of triumph in this and a lot of rage at the same time. It's a bit more, it's a little bit less impressionist, a little bit less manic than that first Tra album from this year, which is another fantastic album. But that is just a sublime piece of work. If you don't know, Tra writes in his own language that he made up. Crazy stuff. And it's emotionally dynamic and it's fantastic. And that is 60 great black metal albums. I'm so happy to say. Hope you guys enjoyed the series because wasn't it awesome? But that's about it. If you enjoyed Nothing But Black Metal in November this year, like and subscribe, babies. Go ahead and comment down below. I'm very happy to do this, and I love doing this stuff for you guys, and I hope I can do it as long as I can. But I hope you guys enjoyed. If you have any comments, questions, or concerns, go ahead and comment down below. Social medias are in the description if you want to follow me on any of that stuff. Join my Discord page. It's about to be album of the year time, and I'm really hyped for that because I got some really good stuff that I need to re-listen to be honest with y'all. But that is about it. So hope you guys are doing well out there. Have a good December now, and have a good day. Bye.